Right, it's doing.
That looks fine, Liz.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Right, legacy stories. We called this legacy stories today because we want you to leave today with being a bit inspired, really, and encouraged that actually talking about legacies is actually quite exciting. Most people don't like talking about things to do with stewardship, even more so with legacy, but actually it really is a good news story. And hopefully as we go along, you'll find out why, hear a bit more why. Why should we talk about wills and legacies? Well, there are three key areas to talk about. So let's look at the first one. Stewardship, that's why we're doing it, because we do stewardship. But coming back to that core reason, when we think about our own relationship with God, this is one of my favourite verses. Everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. Or the other translation, all things come from you, and of your own do we give you, which was one of the responses we used to use. And so if everything that we have in our life comes from God, and we want to offer ourselves, our all back to him, then that also applies for when we die as well. The things we leave behind, do we leave those to God? Do we ask God what we should do with those? So it is an issue of stewardship. It's also, one thing we probably don't think about so much is it's a pastoral issue for our church leaders to think about. I'll explain why. Going back all the way to 1662, Archbishop Cranmer wrote the prayer book in English language almost 500 years ago, and it was actually written then how important it was for people to leave a will. And a few things there. Let them then be admonished to make his will for the better discharging of his conscience. Well, when you've made a will, you feel better, don't you? That you've left your loved ones provided for and that it's been sorted out. And the second one, and the quietness of his executors. Again, if you leave a will, or if you don't leave a will, then it causes a lot of problems for those who are the executors of your estate. And so, yes, they much prefer you did that. And then what does he say? Men should often be put in remembrance to take order for the settling of their temporal estates whilst they are in health. So it's a good idea to do that sooner rather than later and get on with it while you're all feeling in good health. As I say, it's actually a simple act of good stewardship, and here are some of those reasons. That first one there, it's about your choice. So you've thought through what you're doing, and it's your choice in where your assets go. If you haven't left a will, then that will be decided by the government. Your children. Now, sometimes people don't think about how important it is they leave a will, even if they think they haven't got any money, to do with their children. Because in your will, it talks about who the guardians are of your children if you die. And I know when our son was born, that was we wrote a will at that point. And it took us quite a while, really, to decide who we should put down as the guardians for Finley, because we decided not, normally you'd think, well, just your parents would do it, but it's like, well, my parents are getting on in age, and it's not really fair on them to be looking after him for all his life. Can you imagine, especially during his teenage years? And then we thought about my brother, and we thought, well, I'm not sure about that. So we finally got to thinking about his godparents, and we had to ask them. So it's quite a process, actually, but how important that part is. It's not just about what you're doing with your money. It's about your whole family situation. So that's why it again goes back to being pastoral as much as stewardship. I mean, do we ask people in church, have you left a will? Have you made a will? Especially when they're younger, and how important that is. Your property, of course, that's really important, that decides where that goes. modern family life, again, with these days, with divorce, separation, if you remarry, then your original will then becomes invalid. And so a lot of people don't realize that. So again, it's our pastoral responsibility as much to keep reminding people to make a will to start with, but also to renew it as and when. Charitable gifts. Do we think about that? Do we give to charity in our wills? We are very generous as a nation, but do we actually leave gifts in our wills? And I've got a statistic a bit further down about that. And then, of course, that whole peace of mind. We have done what we need to do. So those are some of the, I think, stewardship and pastoral issues. The reason for talking about wills and legacies in our churches: covered the pastoral, covered the stewardship aspect, the financial opportunity for future sustainability of our churches. Financial opportunity. Here we go, there's that statistics. 75% of Britons regularly give to charity. Only 6% leave a gift in their wills. It's quite a shock, isn't it, that amount? 75%. And if it's only 6%, the majority of those will leave a gift in their will to a well-known charity. So any guesses? Some of you who are in perhaps a previous webinar might have heard a bit about this, but any guesses, if you'd like to share on the chat, what I can see actually. Christine will have to tell me what they are.
Yeah, I can see it, but there's no guesses as yet.
Who do you think's the most popular?
Somebody said cancer research.
Yeah.
And MLI?
RNLI.
RNLI, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It's because it was in lowercase, I couldn't read it.
Well done. Yeah. Any more? What do you think's the third? Actually, those are the top two.
Yeah, well done.
Any more?
That's it for the moment, I think.
That's it, all quiet. Yeah, that's right, exactly it. And here we go. Here's a that's to show you the top 6 exactly. Cancer research, lifeboats, RNLI, Macmillan third, RSPCA, British Heart Foundation, and National Trust. And let me grab, I've got it written down here how that's it. Now the orange section there is the total voluntary income. So that's the day by day, people going, giving ad hoc or monthly amounts, that kind of thing. That's what we'd in a sense talk about our regular giving in churches. And then the yellow section, lighter or light orange, is the legacy income. And as you can see there, that the difference between the regular and the legacy, it's quite interesting that for most of those, it's about half of the income they have comes from legacies. So here we go. Yeah, so cancer research, £188 million in the last year, or 2019, I think this was, 188 million through legacies. RNLI, 118 million. And then all the similar ones along there to National Trust, 62 million. So, as I say, that's half. They're depending on half of the amount of their voluntary income to come from legacies to keep them afloat or going. Now, if we compare this to where the Church of England sits in that, can you see the difference there? The Church of England relies mostly on voluntary income. So that's our regular giving, our weekly giving, our from parishioners or fundraising things like that, compared to the legacy amount, which is a tiny part of that. 7% only comes from legacies. So why do you think that is? What's the reason why we're not being as successful in our area of legacies as these other charities. Does anybody want to offer a suggestion? Christine, because I can't see it. It's not on my screen, the chat. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I haven't got any replies yet to that one.
No.
Oh, here we go. Etienne says less publication.
Yep.
Gus says we don't talk about it.
Yes.
Charlotte also says we don't talk about it.
Great. Yep. Okay, well, absolutely right. If we look at it here, here's some possibly common reasons why why we don't receive those sort of legacies. And I think the most common reason, or the real reason, is that they didn't know they could. Exactly as you've just said, we don't talk about it. We don't like to talk about it. I mean, for some people, there will be some of those reasons there that are important. They don't actually have a will, can't really afford to. A lot of people obviously will be putting their family first and making sure that their family are looked after. And that's absolutely right. Some people would agree with that comment there, the Church of England's perceived wealth. Yes, a lot of people think, well, the church doesn't need our money. Possibly lack of trust, maybe, perhaps, you know, they don't like the vicar. They don't know. I don't know. I don't have thought the church might not be around in the future. I don't think people would think much that way. I don't think that's a very high amount, but certainly didn't know they could. I want to give you one example. Our church warden has been helping a member of our congregation who's been going to our church for a long time to write her will. She doesn't have any family, and so he was helping her, and she was thinking about the different charities that she'd like to leave her money to. She didn't think of including the church. And he actually said to me, he said, I didn't really know what to say to her because, you know, I thought I should suggest the church. And I was trying to gently suggest the church might be something she might want to leave part of her money to. But isn't that interesting that somebody that's been going to church all their life, to the particular church, it's not like somebody who's moved churches every few years, and didn't think that the church counts as a charitable organisation to leave some money to. So one of the important things, and we've been talking about these quite a lot through quite a lot of our webinars, is our story and communicating what it is that we're all about and why we're here as a church. And Lifeboats, RNLI, they get it right. And we talked about that in a few of ours, the way they talk about how people's money is spent and the difference that their giving makes to them as a charity. And this gives you a classic example of that. When you read that, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Gosh, 6 out of 10 lifeboat launches are only possible thanks to a gift left in someone's will. And that's quite a lot, isn't it? And you think, gosh, if people don't leave money in their wills, then people will be in trouble. People will be lost at sea, won't be able to help them. So it really makes you think, doesn't it, about how important it is to leave money in your will. And this is one of the ways that just a small way that in the church we should be thinking as we're communicating that. And I think this is in the pack. Christine's going to be talking a bit in a minute about, well, not in a minute, about the pack that's available on church legacies. And the leaflet is in there as well with this, I think, in there. You know, thanks to Gifts in Wills. This is almost another way of communicating how RNLI did it. This is the difference giving and donations through Legacies will make. Okay, so our 3 areas. So we've talked about pastoral, talked about stewardship, talked about the financial opportunity. So it obviously is a big opportunity there for us to communicate that. And then finally, it's life affirming, and generosity makes people happy. World Happiness Report 2019. I bet you've all read that. But no, it's true. When we're generous, when we give, there is actually something in our brains that releases this dopamine that makes us feel good. So it's good for us to be generous. It's good for us to give. And so when we give through these sort of donations and even prepare for that, it's actually good for us. And so as we listen next to Christine's stories and talks us through that, hopefully we'll see how hearing other people's stories also encourages us and is quite inspirational. So as I say, that's what we're hoping, that by the end of this session, that we'll feel, oh, actually, no, this is actually some really inspirational stories that we want to share with our congregation. And without it being something that we're saying, right, everybody, come on, we want you to give to our church, it's telling those stories and inspiring others. Okay, I'll get back to, there it was. Over to Christine.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so first of all, I'd just like to share a little video. Liz was talking about stories. I've got a little story from the Diocese of Exeter. It's quite a long video, so as we go through, I'm going to be jumping. You'll see me just pausing and jumping through it a little bit because it's 7 minutes long if we were to watch all of it, which would take up too much time, but you can watch it yourselves another time. If you'd like to, I'll include it in the link when I send the email out. So I'm just going to put up this little video, so just enjoy this for a few minutes. If I can do it. Here we are, what's that? Okay, Liz, shout if it doesn't work.
This church is a very welcoming church, and that's what attracted us to it in the first place. We are a church family, and that's one of the things that Jack and Babs introduced into the church vocabulary, really.
Can you turn it up, Christine? It's a bit quiet, actually.
And actually, we want to bless each other, and increasingly...
Sorry, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to put the volume up. Can you hear it though? Is it okay? Or I'll carry on.
We want to bless the people outside the church, which is what the outreach and the new reordering has enabled us to do a lot more of. They were welcomers. They were the classic couple that met you at the door with a big smile and said, "Hi, lovely to see you." Jack and Babs were the sort of people who encouraged you. And when you had a problem, let's pray about it. And that idea of them praying and us praying with them has always been a part of what I remember in Big Babs. The legacy left by Jack and Babs was somewhere in the region of £450,000, which is a lot of money. The rector at the time asked the congregation what they thought they would like to do with this money, because it's a big chunk of money. And he suggested that we might like to reorder the church. Their legacy was also to challenge us, because when you are left a huge amount of money like that, it is a blessing, an absolute God-given blessing, but there's also a responsibility involved in that, because as a church, you have to try and use that money wisely. And it was a challenge to the whole of the church family, then and now, to actually use the money and the example that they gave us. We did the reordering in 2 phases. Phase 1 was principally at the west end of the church. We wanted to create a level access through into the church for people in wheelchairs and with other disabilities. We also built an extension which is in the angle of the tower and the west wall of the church. And this extension is a meeting room, mainly used for children's work. Below us is a small kitchen, disabled toilet and a normal toilet. And the balcony, which is behind you, which basically was replacing a balcony that had been taken out in Victorian times. So it provides an overflow for large congregations. It provides meeting spaces. It provides a small office space, and it provides access into the ringing chamber, which is next door to us. And that is what Jack and Bowes financed.
They're a very outward-looking church and really want to engage and serve the community. So although the legacy from Jack and Bowes has been spent a lot on the building, it's not simply a building project. The people of the church are what make the church what it is. And as I understand it, part of the legacy of Jack and Bowes was actually the spirit of wanting to serve the community. And I like to think, in a sense, that what we've done is turn the building inside out so that people can see what it is and can see the welcome.
We get quite a lot of people who just drop in, go into the chapel to pray. We've gone out and we've started Chatterbox Cafe. And Chatterbox Cafe is a community cafe that we run in the local community every Friday morning. And it came from being sociable inside the church to actually realising that we had the ability and the team ethos and the Holy Spirit could take that outside.
I think legacies are a really amazing way for people to say thank you to a church that has been part of their life and to enable the church to serve the next generation. I think it's amazing that legacies can be spent on all sorts of different things. You can spend them on a building project, which is what this was. You can spend it on something which employs somebody, but it helps the church pass on the good news and the joy of what you've had, your experience of worshipping in that building.
Okay. I couldn't see the chat when that was going on, I'm afraid. So, so this is all just coming. I hope you could hear that. I can see now. Yeah. Anyway, hopefully you could hear it. Yeah, I couldn't see any of the chat there. I'm sorry. I just saw Liz giving a thumbs up, so I assume.
Sorry, yeah, sorry. I thought that was it was the moving it across the timeline, not the volume.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I will also send a link. It's a very inspiring video. I'll send a link to it in the follow-up email as well. So you can watch that at your leisure and hear it a bit better, hopefully. Okay, let's go on to the next section. I'm going to share my presentation. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. So first of all, just to have a look at our diocese, you can see that in our own diocese, this is over the last 10 years, a huge amount of money has come into the diocese through Legacies, nearly £7 million there. And you can see that every deanery has had their share of that. In all the deaneries, there's been significant legacies coming in. And it's amazing. We've got this great opportunity. This money that comes in, it's a really good source of income. And I just wanted to tell you just a few stories of some of those legacies from around the diocese, just to kind of encourage and inspire you really, and see the sorts of things that can be done. Oh dear, I forgot to take off the transitions, but there we are. So just a few stories from the diocese. So firstly, at St. Goran Church, they've received a couple of legacies. They've been very blessed to receive some quite significant legacies. In 2016, they received nearly £20,000, which was a legacy that was left particularly for St. Just Church, which is a small chapel of ease near the beach in Gornhaven. And so they used that legacy for improving the altar and upgrading the pew runners there, because many visitors come into that little chapel. They like to pray, they like to be quiet there. And so they improved that chapel to improve that experience for visitors. So to encourage them, to welcome them really into that chapel. And it was a place that was important to the person who left the legacy. They have the balance from that legacy in a restricted reserve to be used again to improve that chapel. In 2017, they had another large legacy from a long-standing member of the church who was 102 when she died. And this legacy just transformed their finances. They improved the heating system, and they were able to employ the first parish nurse in Cornwall, which is an amazing project that they've done there. And then the balance of the capital was set aside to pay for a new roof. And that's been invested, and the interest is helping them to pay their MMF and helping with general running of the church. So it's generally transformed everything that they do there. And one thing that really kind of inspired us from St. Goran was the way they communicate. They send out letters communicating with their congregation. And this little extract was from a letter that the treasurer sent out recently, saying, "I'm told that the Dogs Trust and Cats Protection receive a lot of legacies because they ask for them, whilst the Church of England is just very grateful when they appear. So may I take this opportunity suggesting that when you update your will, you consider St. Goran Church." And yeah, it's that talking about legacies. It's being open, being able to ask for people to consider the church in their will. To ask. If we don't ask, we won't receive. I'm sorry, I forgot to remove those transitions. They're very annoying. Okay, another church is Parish of Milo, where they received 35,000 in a legacy, which again they used in a small mission church at Milo Bridge, where the donor had worshipped from time to time, and they roofed that church. They had a wonderful little project where they sold slates from the old roof as memorial for friends and family. They got a little bit of extra money from that and from a gift day, and they've still got a little bit of money left over that they're going to be spending on heating. But people had that memorial as well, so continuing that idea of remembering their friends and family. And that church is now being used for all sorts of activities, for a messy church, for special community services, and for a community garden, which is a wonderful enterprise involving the school, involving other community groups. So it's a real community focus there. And they say, "We feel we've put this money to excellent use. With our new incumbent, we can see that this church will be used for services several times a month and for informal and lay-led worship. And we know that it is safe for at least another 100 years. So it's a really good example of using that legacy to enable the church to reach out to the community. And in Ruan Lanihorn, they had a large legacy in 2014, which was restricted to be used only for the fabric of the church. But the quinquennial had highlighted many urgent repairs, and they were able to carry those out: re-roofing, repainting, reflooring, repointing, all sorts of different things that they were able to do using that legacy. And again, they say, without the legacy, none of this work could have been completed, and we would have been desperately trying to raise money to pay for essential repairs. We now have a church which we can pass on to future congregations, knowing for some years all is safe from the elements. And I'm sure that our benefactor would have been pleased with what we have done. So again, it's without that money, they wouldn't have been able to do that work, and the church would have gone into disrepair. But now they have a living church that can continue into the future. In Budok, they had a couple of legacies, one of 27,000 in 2014, which was used as match funding for a grant towards roof repairs. They needed 25% match funding, and so that legacy was able to be used for that, which would have been very difficult to get from the general church finances. And in 2015, they had a smaller legacy. But even small legacies can go a long way. It was able to pay for their contribution towards Churches Together, contribution towards the kids club, for Christmas cards to be distributed through the parish, and for a leaders course. So again, some really positive outreach and mission work that they were doing, which was enabled by this legacy. They say we were very fortunate to have these together with others over the years. It's a tremendous help in the running of our churches. And finally, Padstow. Padstow have been blessed to have several legacies over the years. They had a very large one in 2014, which was left by a retired priest from Padstow, who left half his estate to the church. So that was split into two halves. One was for the Coracle Appeal, which is a fund that they have for repair and renovation of the church. And those funds were used for tower renovations. And again, it was match funding for a Heritage Lottery Fund grant. They needed 40% match funding, so they were able to use their Coracle Appeal funds for that. Then the second half was to be used for the St. Petrot's church rooms, or their church hall, and they had a complete replacement of the church rooms, were able to build offices, a hall, kitchen, toilets, all sorts of different things. But again, that was match funding. They applied for a large grant from CETA, and again, they needed 40% match funding for that. So a legacy can be used for that kind of thing. If you're applying for a grant, you can put your legacy up as match funding. They say a legacy can facilitate major beneficial improvements by enabling match funding for grant applications and spurring local fundraising by being able to demonstrate the positive things being done with those funds. And again, in Padstow, and another of their legacies was from an old parishioner. It was somebody who suffered from learning difficulties, and when their mother died, they asked the vicar to look out for the lady. And then when she died, she then left a legacy for the church in a response to that care that she'd had from the vicar. This was a recent legacy, so it's gone to the general fund to help them at a very difficult time over this year. And they say it's of note that in these two cases, it's the wish and work of a vicar that's resulted in the legacy. Without a dedicated person personifying the love of the church, there's a lack of human emotional attachment. And without that, the ideas of making a living donation or committing to a legacy bequest are easily forgotten. So it's that personal, building relationships with people, making legacies something that is talked about, but building those relationships so that people remember the church when they're thinking about where to leave their gifts. Okay, so moving on just to a little bit about some of the resources that are available to help you in this subject. So firstly, Liz showed you, I've got one too. Liz showed you the Legacy Pack. This is something that you can get free. There's a link at the bottom of the slide here, the Church Print Hub, and you can order your Legacy Pack for free, Legacy Toolkit. And it's got all sorts of different things in it. So they have little bookmarks, which you can maybe use in the pews just to encourage people to think about legacies. Also little leaflets that can be left out for the congregation with some basic information, and some of the information that Liz included on her presentation is in there as well. There's a PCC guide which has some really helpful information in it to help your PCC when talking about legacies. There's a poster that you can pop up in your church as well, all sorts of really useful literature in there. It also includes a draft legacy policy. So the second point there is to discuss making a legacy policy at your PCC and communicate that policy widely. And a legacy policy is something that's really important because it just shows that the PCC have considered legacies and that they welcome legacies from people and that they will use them. In your legacy policy, you can set out how those legacies will be used, but also to encourage unrestricted gifts so that that gifts aren't restricted to certain things, but they can be used in ways that the PCC have worked out together. So it's an important thing to do, and there is a draft policy in that pack which can help you to work through that with your PCC, so you can write a legacy policy for your church. Oh yeah, Liz is holding it up. So that's a draft legacy policy from the Legacy Toolkit.
Yeah, it's quite handy, and it's not very long, so it's not like it has to be pages and pages and pages and
Yeah.
spend hours on.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's all there for you to use.
Yeah, it just helps you to go through it, and the little PCC guide as well just helps you to work through that and to write that policy. Then point 3 there, make those leaflets available. So the smaller leaflets and the bookmarks and information, just have them available in the church. So it's something that people are thinking about. It's not, when you start talking about it, it's not something that's alien. It's something that people are, it's on people's minds. It's the norm, really, that it's something that is discussed. Which brings me on to talking about legacies.
Actually, just to say, I was going to say, if you've got one of those welcome packs for new people coming to church with, which usually has, you know, how to give to this church, things like that, then you can include them in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's talking about it so that it's just another way of giving. People don't see it as something different, but it's just one amongst many ways of giving. When you're talking about joining the parish giving scheme, when you're talking about gift aiding your donations, when you're talking about maybe you know, signing up to a standing order, all these different things, it's just another way of giving. It's and as Liz said, can be part of that welcome pack and showing people how they can give. So talk about legacies, use case studies, tell people about how legacies can be used, and celebrate legacies. If you've had legacies in your church, talk about them, show people that some of the things that you've been able to achieve in your church are because of the legacy of one of your parishioners. Thank you letters are a really good thing to use when you're writing to people, thanking them for their gifts, thanking them for giving in different ways. You can also say, and thank you to those who've thought about including a gift in their will. So it's a really important way of just again making it the norm, making it something that's talked about. Testimonies are great. If you have a living parishioner who's included a gift in their will already and have gone through that process of thinking how they might write that into their will, and they're willing to talk about that and share that with the congregation, that's a really powerful way of encouraging people as well. On the right hand side of the screen there, all those different ways that you can, different places and different ways that you can talk about legacies in your APCMs, through preaching, through your small groups, through your website, maybe on your website including some of this literature as PDFs on your website so people can have a look at that, and simple emails to people just encouraging people gently and sensitively to consider including a gift in their will. You could hold a parish legacy event if you want to go that far. Often it's better just to, in little bits, just to continually talk about it, but a legacy event might be a way to kind of launch your legacy policy and to start the conversation around legacies.
Just to say, there's the Free Wills Month coming up. That's quite a nice intro way of talking about legacies, you know, to advertise Free Wills Month. It's Free Wills, what's the website? I've just looked it up now. freewillsmonth.org.uk. And although they've got particular charities, that the usual ones are there, but you don't have to give your donation to that charity. So solicitors do the will for free, and then you donate to a charity. But that can be other charities, doesn't have to be the ones just specified. So it's a good way for churches to introduce the subject and say, hey, you know, do you know it's Free Wills Month? So if you haven't written your will, here you are, da da da, and here's some more just leaflets or information. And it's just a gentle way of introducing, talking about legacies and wills.
Yeah, thank you. These are just a few little ideas for how to write in your letters or in your emails, how to write to people, how to introduce the idea of legacies. After your loved ones are taken care of, then you could continue. Please consider giving a gift in your will to the church. As little as 1% could make a real difference. Any gift, big or small, will help our church family. Every gift in every will makes a valued contribution. So just sensitive small ways of just broaching the subject. Some more resources. The Parish Resources website has a wealth of resources on all areas of stewardship and giving, but there's a section on legacy giving in there, which includes links to some of this literature we've been talking about, but it's also just gives some really helpful advice, particularly in writing your legacy policy and how to promote legacies in your church. Really useful advice, so I'd encourage you to have a look at that. There's all sorts of useful information on there. Also the Church of England Church Legacy site, which is on that link there, that's really useful as well. That's more for individuals, helping people in writing their wills and people who are considering leaving a legacy, and it gives you help and advice on how to do that. So that's something that you can publicise to your congregation as well. If they're thinking of leaving a gift in their will, this will give them a lot of help and advice. There are some leaflets as well. I had one ready to show you. There's some leaflets that go along with that as well, which you can get from that website. So, and that's a really useful little leaflet that gives you some more information and some more advice on leaving a gift in your will. I think that's the end. Yeah, that's so I've come to the end there. These are our contacts.
Just say we've got some questions.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So Charlotte, thank you. Good question. Could you tell us more about a policy and what might be in it? Want to answer that, or?
Okay.
We've got here. Actually, that's why this leaflet I was showing up there, that's in the pack, example legacy policy. Really, yeah, it is. You're right. You just put it there. Is it mainly about how it would be spent? Yes. So it's a good idea. What it does, it helps your PCC to think ahead. So you could always do it in a small or a medium or a large amount, and say, right, if we had if we had £10,000, what would we do with that? Or if we had 30,000, what would we do with that? Or if we had 100,000, what would we do with that? And it just means then when somebody does leave a legacy, you're not then starting to think, oh, right, what should we spend this on now? So it's just a bit of forethought, really, that's helpful and helps as you communicate with congregation as well. Just means you've done a bit of the work in advance.
The other thing with the legacy policy, it usually includes a contact as well. So there's a specific contact who you would elect in your PCC, who would be the legacy contact. So on the policy, that name is there, so people know who to contact if they want advice, or if they want to talk more about the sorts of things that legacy will be used for.
Yeah, and it can be something, because it can be a public document as well for some people. So it just it helps people to be confident in what they're giving for. I mean, some people will specifically say, I want this to be spent on new chairs or something that they feel strongly about, but it also helps people to think about leaving will in a more open, general way, rather than it being specific, because as soon as it's in restricted purpose, then it can be there might be other more pressing needs.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? Coming in, I think.
I can't see any more. I think.
No, we've covered. So hopefully it's covered everything. So Parish Resources also has some really good little videos, although I think also the Church Legacy one does. But if you want to use,
I think they both do.
There was one I was looking for while we're talking that I remember, which probably is on the Parish Resources, and it was a lady in Wales, I think it was, and so she was being talking about leaving a legacy you know, before she died or something. And I found that quite inspiring, actually, for myself personally. So it's worth having a look at some of those as well. I hope it's given you just given you a taste of how actually approaching legacies doesn't have to be as scary and worrying to offend people. It can be done very gently and sensitively, and also celebrating really, and inspiring stories, and how
making it a normal thing as well,
yeah.
not a scary thing, but just something that's talked about alongside other aspects of stewardship.
Yeah, that's right. And in talking about it in a general way, have you thought about leaving gifts in your wills apart from family to other charitable things? So
yeah.
Okay, Etienne, a question there from Etienne. I was just wondering about the arrangements around an estate and whether we would need legal cover or legal advice around an estate. If it's depends really. I think obviously if the will's already been written and that's been set up, if there are problematic, sometimes there might, well, I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there was any problematic issues. Generally, it's always good to get legal advice if there's any issues. Yeah, yes, generally, yes, just written there. I suppose the money just gets paid in by the estate executors. Yes, it does. I know there's been a situation where a will has been challenged by family, but again, that's out of your hands, really. That's always been looked after by the legal teams anyway. But then there is
about the legal side on, is it Parish Resources or is it on Church Legacy? On one of those websites, there is information about the legal side of things.
Yes, that's right, and there is support anyway through through the diocese for any legal issues.
Yeah.
So there's support anyway.
Okay, I think that's probably everything. Yeah, I hope that's been helpful, and please encourage others to have a look at it on the website once we post it up there. Yeah, just one thing I wanted to say, with all of our parish support webinars that we've been doing, if there's anybody who wants something like this on a more local level, on a parish level or a benefice level, or even a deanery level, we'd be willing to do a more local webinar. We're sort of coming to the end for now of our parish support webinars. We're going to have another one in September, and there will also be some Meet the Funders webinars throughout the autumn. But yeah, if anybody would like something like this on a more local level, please get in touch with us, and we'd be very happy to do that on whichever subject that we've done before, or something new. So yeah, do get in touch. Yeah, is that everything, Liz?
Yes, it is. I know that we haven't got a few people here. I don't know anything about treasurers, but we are doing a survey is coming out very soon, and we'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mind completing that to help us with our planning as well, moving forward, and support in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all very much. Have a good day. God bless.
Thanks for coming. Bye.